Anytime you beg another man to set you free, you'll never be free. Freedom is something that you have to do for yourself.
Okay, so I wanted to talk today about this idea of the ultimate revolution. I'll probably drop the video right at the beginning here. It's Aldous Huxley describing it.
The dictatorship of the future, I think, will be very unlike the dictatorships which we've been familiar with in the immediate past. I mean, take another book prophesying the future, which was a very remarkable book, George Orwell's 1984. Well, this book was written at the height of the Stalinist regime and just after the Hitler regime. And there he foresaw a dictatorship using entirely the methods of terror, the methods of physical violence. Now, I think what is going to happen in the future is the dictators will find, as the old saying goes, that you can do everything with bayonets except sit on them. That if you want to preserve your power indefinitely, you have to get the consent of the ruled. And this they will do partly by drugs, as I foresaw in Brave New World, partly by these new techniques of propaganda. They will do it by bypassing the sort of rational side of man and appealing to his subconscious and his deeper emotions and his physiology even, and so making him actually love his slavery. I mean, I think this is the danger, that actually people may be in some ways happy under the new regime, but they will be happy in a situation where they oughtn't to be happy.
But let me ask you this. You're talking about a world that could take place within the confines of a totalitarian state. Let's become more immediate, more urgent about it. We believe, anyway, that we live in a democracy here in the United States. Do you believe that this brave new world that you talk about could, let's say in the next quarter century, the next century, could come here to our shores?
I think it could. I mean, that's why I feel it's so extremely important here and now to start thinking about these problems, not to let ourselves be taken by surprise by the new advances in technology. I mean, for example, in regard to the use of the drugs, we know there's enough evidence now for us to be able, on the basis of this evidence and using a certain amount of creative imagination, to foresee the kind of uses which could be made by people of bad will with these things, and to attempt to forestall this. And in the same way, I think with these other methods of propaganda, we can foresee and we can do a good deal to forestall. I mean, after all, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance.
Now, there's a quote there that Aldous Huxley uses. He says that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And really, do you think people in our societies these days, in modern Western societies, are eternally vigilant about how we're being governed? I don't see that at all. I think people only pay attention for a short period of time when elections are happening. And when they are paying attention, they're really not paying attention to the things that really matter. They're paying attention to what these illusionists, these sort of almost magicians, force onto the public discourse. The issues that they tell you to care about. And the things that you really should care about, like whether or not you're being enslaved to debt that's created from nothing, and your children are being enslaved by debt that's created from nothing, people don't even talk about that. Where was the discussion about that in this election cycle? Nobody talked about it. And it's a fucking damn shame, because that's the only thing we should really care about. So the general idea here is that the people who really control things politically and financially in the world, they can't just overtly crush people the way that's kind of presented in like 1984, George Orwell's 1984. It's not really how they would go about doing things, because if you do that, it provokes resistance. It provokes the anger of the people, and that if they really wanted to maintain power long term, what they have to actually do is gain the consent of the people they're dominating and controlling and enslaving. And really, I was optimistic when Donald Trump became president in 2016 that he would try to change things, that he would turn things around, because he said that he wanted to eliminate the US national debt. But by the time his term had ended, he'd actually added more to the US debt than any other president before him. So I'm not super optimistic that he's really interested in turning things around, but I mean, he says a lot of things that get people excited that he's going to do things, and really I think largely the whole game of politics has become a puppet show where on any particular issue, one side plays the good cop and one puppet plays the bad cop. And all of these social issues that they get people distracted and fighting over are really insignificant to the people in power. They don't care about any of that shit. At the end of the day, the only thing they care about is that they can create money from nothing and force the rest of us to work for it. And use us essentially through that mechanism as slaves. Modern day financial slavery. And I kind of feel like we may have actually already gotten to the point where people are so easily controlled through social media algorithms, and that the intelligent manipulation of the public mind through whatever's trending, that if they see that the public is paying attention to something, or really concerned about something that they don't want us to be paying attention to, they can create distractions and then tweak the algorithm to make sure that the things that we don't want, the things that they don't want us paying attention to, are never really trending, and that we never really gain momentum fighting these things. And I think you see that very clearly with Bitcoin, because I think the problem is that more than anything, the greatest threat to the ultimate revolution as described by Huxley is blockchain, because we could actually build systems that are outside of centralized control, and not just financial control, but we can build alternatives to these big tech companies, these big tech outlets that dominate our lives, that control the information we have access to. I mean, I think the only way we could really escape as a collective out of this ultimate revolution is to use blockchain technology in a way that takes power out of the hands of these people who are really wielding way too much power right now than we should allow them to have. And ultimately, I think people are so caught up in the bullshit that they want us paying attention to that it's probably not going to work out for a lot of people. I don't think it's good to like give people a false sense of hope that, yeah, we're going to do this and everyone's going to rally around the right thing. Because I mean, you just look at how divided people are. Now, I know a lot of people after the election, they took a lot of pleasure and found a lot of humor in the meltdown videos of people absolutely losing their minds because Donald Trump had won the presidency again. But I mean, it's kind of fucked up that you see people having a mental health crisis and you take pleasure in it, because it's kind of a sign. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I laughed at a lot of those videos. Some of them are genuinely kind of funny because these people are out of their minds, but on a deeper level, like, it's a fucked up sign of the times that people get so invested emotionally in these political scumbags who don't give a fuck about them. And I'm sorry, as much as people like Donald Trump, if he adds more to the debt in this next term than he takes away from it, he's not really working for you. At the end of the day, like, that's the measure by which I will judge all of these people, is how much are they forcing you to work for money that's created from nothing. And I'll give him another 4 years to see. I mean, I'm Canadian, but I'm just saying for my own judgment. I mean, I'm sure a lot of Americans will say it's none of my business because I'm Canadian, but this is just my own commentary, my own 2 cents. If he adds more to the debt than he takes away, the guy's a piece of shit, and he's fucking enslaving you to the Federal Reserve System. And if he doesn't try to get rid of that system, like he didn't the last 4 years, why the fuck would you put your support behind this guy who's fucking enslaving you to imaginary debt?
Politicians and the media always pushing the things that separate us, things that make us different. That's the way the ruling class operates in any society. They divide the rest of the people. They keep the lower and the middle classes fighting with each other so that they, the rich, can run off with all the fucking money. Fairly simple thing, happens to work. Anything that's different about us, you know that's what they're pushing at you. Racial differences, religious, ethnic, national backgrounds, jobs, income, education, social status, sexuality, anything they can do to keep us fighting with each other so that they can keep going to the bank.
I mean, it's really crazy that so many people who were saying that Kamala Harris and the Democrats were going to steal the election before it happened, as soon as they got the result they wanted, they're like, oh, it's legit. But nobody really knows. We don't have a way of verifying votes. We don't have a blockchain-based voting system that you can use to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt by yourself, independently audit the vote to see that there was no bullshit being done. And, I mean, just inverse to that is there's people who are accusing the Trump side of saying, accusing them of pretty much saying that they would reject the election result if Kamala won. And then when Trump won, they're calling out the authenticity of the result. So, I mean, just simple things like that, where we could have a blockchain-based voting system so that it's very obvious who won and that there's no room for doubt and you don't have to trust, but you can actually verify the result. We should be able to verify our election result if we're going to have elections this way. I mean, I think that people who see what's going on, they see that there's this sort of ultimate revolution taking place where the political class has the scientific management over the public mind and public perception. The best thing for us to do is probably to go into jurisdictions where they have a lot less control. So try to get yourself citizenship in some place where you're not taxed half your life. I mean, I think that's probably the best course of action for the people who see what's going on in the world right now. I think it's going to be very, very hard to impose change in the places where these people have like just a stranglehold on control right now. But I think, like I said, the best hope that people have to actually escape these sort of control systems is through blockchain, and not just through the financial control of having, I don't know, transparent tax systems so that you can see how your tax money is being spent, but other systems as well, like seeing how these algorithms are set up to control the flow of information, because people can only make informed choices when they have all the information ahead of them. I mean, this is something that we saw during COVID, where people were pretending that they were given informed consent or giving informed consent with these COVID vaccines, but really people didn't have enough information to even really give informed consent, because so much of what you needed to know to make an informed choice was censored and kept away from people. And I think this ultimate revolution that Aldous Huxley warned about, it's really upon us, and we don't have enough people really talking about it. It's something that it's been wiped out of public discourse, and wrongfully so, because I think it's the biggest issue we face right now is the ongoing ultimate revolution that he warned about, where these people, through all these different tools and the new ones that are emerging now with artificial intelligence, there's an enormous danger with these things, and people, they're sort of aware of that because, I mean, mainstream media has made people aware of and afraid of certain things to deal with AI, but I think the bigger risk is actually psychology, that people are just being psychologically manipulated, and then eventually they'll probably have AI manipulating the algorithm specific to individuals to suppress all kinds of things, all kinds of dissent, all kinds of resistance that forms up against the power structures that exist in the world. And when we see AI take over in these fields, it's going to be a sort of end game for people. Now, really, I think what's going on is that they have, regardless of where you are, they have a couple political parties that are deeply in bed with big tech and big finance, and they use a sort of good cop, bad cop routine over and over again to get people riled up on social issues that they actually deeply care about, that the public really cares about, but the people in power don't care about at all. They live in these insulated communities, these gated communities, and really their day-to-day concerns are nothing close to the concerns of ordinary people. And at the end of the day, the only thing that they care about is that they can continue using the general public as slaves to create money from nothing and force other people to work for it. And that's the one issue that everyone should be united on, is that we shouldn't be forced to work like slaves for bankers who have done nothing in exchange for our labor. But that's not even an issue that people talk about. I mean, I was a big supporter of Ron Paul because he was talking about ending the Federal Reserve. And really, it's a damn shame that he was never president. So I am a little bit optimistic because Donald Trump, there's some talk that he might be brought into the administration with, that Donald Trump is going to bring Ron Paul into the administration. But I don't know if that's going to be just for show. And to be perfectly honest, I don't have a lot of faith in someone who said that they're going to eliminate the US debt and then adds more to it than anyone else. And I know that it was probably because of COVID spending, but still, that's total bullshit. If I was in that position, I would never allow that to happen. And I know it's easy for people to say, oh, like, how would you know? Like, you're kind of putting yourself on this pedestal. But no, like, seriously, I'm a one-issue voter. Like, we should not be slaves to the people in power. And debt is the instrument of our enslavement. That's how they force us to work for them indefinitely. So I'm not super optimistic, but I mean, I will give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt. He's not someone who was trained in medicine. He probably had to rely on a lot of expert advice when COVID happened. And it's unfortunate that such an enormous, or at least a perceived crisis of such a scale, happened during an administration when someone actually promised to wipe out America's debt. But I sort of predict that in the next 4 years, we're not going to see him wipe out much of America's debt. He's talking about a lot of things that are going to cost a lot of money. And he's not talking about ending the Fed like someone like Ron Paul did. So, I mean, we'll see. There was that clip the other day of Jerome Powell saying he wouldn't step down if he was asked to resign by Donald Trump. I'll put that in here probably.
Hi, Victoria Guido with Politico. Some of the president-elect's advisors have suggested that you should resign. If he asked you to leave, would you go?
No.
Can you follow up on, do you think that legally you're not required to leave?
No.
Well, really, I think what's happened here is that we've already passed the point where this ultimate revolution has happened, and the people in power maintain consent of the governed by getting us to fight and take this game of politics seriously and argue about social issues that these people in power really don't care about so that they can keep using us as slaves. And I think the best thing for an individual to do is, if you're someone who wants to get out of this sort of system, is to get new citizenship outside of these big countries. Because really the technology that's being developed, all the different control grid structures that you see are already in place in certain dictatorships around the world. There's probably going to be an increasing number of artificial crises that these people instigate for the sake of further locking down the public, unless people really quickly start to figure out what's going on. And I hope they do.